Have you ever wondered why people once crossed deserts, fought wars, and built entire cities for something that now sits on every dinner table? Imagine walking into a marketplace thousands of years ago with a bag full of gold. Now imagine the merchant looking at it and saying, "I'd rather have salt." It sounds unbelievable. Today, salt is one of the cheapest products you can buy. But for thousands of years, it was one of the world's most valuable resources. Empires taxed it. Trade routes depended on it. Some cities became wealthy because they controlled it. So what made an ordinary white crystal so incredibly valuable? The answer has almost nothing to do with flavor and everything to do with survival. Today, we think of salt as something that makes food taste better. Historically, that was only a small part of its importance. Its real value was preservation. Before refrigerators existed, fresh meat and fish spoiled quickly because bacteria multiplied rapidly. Salt changes that. It draws water out of food and out of many microorganisms through a process called osmosis. Osmosis simply means that water naturally moves across cell membranes toward areas with higher concentrations of dissolved substances. As water leaves bacterial cells, many of them can no longer grow or reproduce. The result? Food lasts dramatically longer. That single property changed human history. Communities could store food through winter. Ships could sail for months. Armies could campaign far from home. Cities could survive poor harvests. Salt didn't simply preserve food. It preserved civilizations. But if salt is so common today, why was it once so expensive? Because producing it was surprisingly difficult. Some regions were fortunate enough to have underground salt mines. Others depended on evaporating seawater, a slow process that required suitable climate, large evaporation ponds, and enormous amounts of labor. Then came transportation. Salt is heavy. Moving tons of it across mountains, rivers, or deserts with horses, camels, or ships was expensive and dangerous. This brings us to one of the most important ideas in economics. The value of something depends on both supply and demand. Supply is how much is available. Demand is how much people need it. When an essential resource is difficult to produce and transport, demand remains high, while supply stays limited. Its value increases, not because people simply want it, but because they cannot live without it. As salt became more valuable, it reshaped entire civilizations. Across the Sahara Desert, caravans carried enormous blocks of salt from famous mines, such as Tagaza. Some blocks were so valuable, they served almost like currency in regional trade. In Europe, prosperous towns developed near rich salt deposits. Governments quickly realized what salt represented. Not just food, but power. One famous example was France's gabelle, a national salt tax introduced during the Middle Ages and maintained for centuries. Because everyone needed salt, taxing it generated enormous government revenue. But it also created resentment. The gabelle became one of many grievances that fueled dissatisfaction before the French Revolution. Control over salt often meant control over wealth, trade, and political influence. You've probably heard the famous claim that salt was once worth more than gold. It's a memorable phrase, but history is a little more nuanced. Gold was generally more valuable by weight. However, in certain regions, during periods of scarcity, or in isolated communities where salt was difficult to obtain, salt could temporarily command extremely high prices and become more economically important than gold. Its value came from usefulness, not simply from rarity. And that teaches us something surprisingly modern. Humans often confuse price with importance. Gold is beautiful. Salt is practical. Economists distinguish between luxury goods and essential goods. Luxury creates desire. Necessity creates demand. History repeatedly shows that societies depend far more on reliable essentials than on expensive luxuries. Technology eventually changed everything. Refrigeration replaced salt's ancient role in food preservation. Production became easier. Transportation became cheaper. And the price of salt collapsed. The resource remained the same. Only the world around it changed. The most valuable things are often the ones we stop noticing. Civilizations were not built on what looked impressive. They were built on what quietly solved humanity's biggest problems. History remembers gold, but for thousands of years, the world truly ran on salt.